Okay, so as I said this morning, the patience chapter is dealing primarily with our anger, and the wisdom chapter deals with our ignorance. This chapter is mostly dealing with desire. So a lot of our desire is sexual desire. And this text was intended for monks. And monks, like everyone else, have problems. And so therefore, one of the ways to help the monks to deal with their sexual desire is the recognition that what they're desiring is not so desirable. As long as we think that what we desire is desirable, we desire it. When we recognize, actually, when you think it's not so great, then it can help us to overcome our strong attachment to the bodies of others as well as to the body of ourselves. Because most desire, sexual desire, is based on physical attraction. There's a story in the Therigatha with the verses of the elder nuns at the time of the Buddha. A very beautiful nun had this admirer who followed her everywhere, who was going on about how beautiful she was and how much, she should leave everything and go with him. And especially he kept on about her beautiful eyes. So eventually she took one of her eyes, plucked it out and gave it to him and said, if this is what you want, there you go. So the point is that when he had an actual eye in his hand, he suddenly was not overcome with desire. So based on this appreciation that so much of what we want is we project our own fantasies onto it. We have to take this chapter, realizing the chapter was not intended for lay people. The chapter was intended for monks. But it's in the chapter here, and it doesn't hurt us to recognize that not only the body of others, but our own body is not nearly as glamorous as we imagine it to be. You're warned. Okay. So, I think we're on verse 39. Is that true? Both in this world and the next, desires give rise to great misfortune. In this life, killing, bondage, flaying, and in the next, the existence of the hells. So people do things. They kill, they rape, they steal, they become bandits, they do all sorts of really bad things, mostly based on desire. Not necessarily sexual desire, but desire for something. And this desire impels us to doing all sorts of things which in our right mind we would never do, and having to face the consequences of our wrong actions. So desire is a very motivating force. There are good desires and bad desires, right? So good desires obviously are the desire for enlightenment for the sake of all beings, the desire to cultivate the good qualities of the heart, like more generosity, more patience, more kindness, and the desire to help the planet, to recover from what we're doing to it, and all sorts of good motivations. Desire per se, in fact, it's a different word in Sanskrit and Tibetan. We only have the one word in English, and so people get confused. And they say, well, if desire is a bad thing, then what about desiring to be a better person, or desiring enlightenment? That's a different kind of desire. It's a different driving force. But here they're talking about specifically, mostly he's talking here specifically about sexual desire, which is not in itself good or bad. It's not that, we're not being puritanical here and saying sex is bad for you, but it is bad for you if you're a monk. And as I say, this chapter, this part of the chapter, he's talking to an audience of monks. Please keep that in mind, okay? And he therefore does not want them drawing on all sorts of fantasies. He wants them to keep to their studies and their practice and not get drawn away by their own imaginations. So he says, if you want to imagine a female, imagine them as they really are, which he's going to tell you about. Okay, so, for the sake of women, many requests are first of all made through go-betweens. All forms of evil and even notoriety are not avoided for their sake. So he's talking here about, people want women, so therefore they either in marriage you have go-betweens. In ancient India as today, there were not actual courtships. You had marriages were arranged, so then you had to have go-betweens, and then there was all this kind of bribery and all sorts of things going on. A lot of hassle, he's saying. I engage in fearful deeds for them and will even consume my wealth. But these very bodies of theirs that I greatly enjoy in sexual embrace are nothing other than skeletons. They are not autonomous and are identityless. Rather than being so desirous and completely obsessed, why do not I not go to the state beyond sorrow? That means nirvana. And become angry towards that instead. So what he's saying is that, the Buddha at the very beginning, when he was dealing with the monks and their sexual fantasies, he said that the monk should contemplate, or none, or anybody, if they really are keen, should contemplate their own body. From the hair on the head to the soles of the feet, it's as if we took the skin, put it all the way down, opened it up, like those models you have in doctors, and looked inside at what is actually there. And as I said before, what is actually there is not the kind of thing you would normally want to fantasize about. Think about it. We are covered, as I say, they say, like a silk bag full of impurities. Our skin may be very lovely, but if we peeled the skin off, even that much, it would not be lovely. Nothing inside us of itself is that attractive. Our brains, our bones, our skeleton. If suddenly your beloved was just a skeleton, would you want to embrace it? We have to, he's not making this up, this is not a fantasy, think about it. What do we have under this bag of our skin? We have heart and lungs and livers, kidneys, intestines full of guck, stomachs, spleens. Nothing that you could point to and go, oh, how adorable. But it's all covered up. So we don't see that. But actually, if you think about it, we're embracing all these really pretty disgusting parts of the body, very useful. Sorry, heart, lungs, very useful, very, very useful, but not in themselves especially attractive. And yet that's what we get enamored with. You know, a skeleton, which is then padded around with all these various organs, and then sewn up in a nice skin. And basically what we fall in love with is the skin. Exactly. Well said. So this is what he's going to go on about, because if you sit and meditate on this, and then the idea was you sat and you removed the skin and you looked part by part by part all the way down, what happens is disenchantment. We are no longer enchanted by the outer form when we recognize what's inside it. Like if we had a beautiful vase, but inside it was filled with shit, would we want it? So this is the point. It's to help the monks to lose their fascination, how much we project onto the other. It's not to cause hatred per se, it's to produce a sense of weariness. Is that what I've been running around, spending all my money on, trying to entice, dreaming about, fantasizing about? Ooh. No, maybe not. Maybe I should really just get down to some real practice of something which is beyond all that. And so this part of the chapter is to arouse disenchantment. So the monks are not sitting there dreaming of what could be somewhere else, that they appreciate what they are doing, what they are studying, and the purity of their lives, and focus their attention and their energies on that. As I say, the Buddha himself was not against marriage. And in the Pali Sutras and also in the Mahayana Sutras, there's some beautiful sutras on the married state and the responsibilities of the husband to the wife, of the wife to the husband, and then to their children. I mean, the Buddha was pragmatic. I mean, he was not against, as I said, he talked always about the fourfold Sangha. Half the fourfold Sangha was the lay people. And he didn't say for them you have to be celibate. Of course he did not. But here Shantideva is specifically addressing the monks. And for the monks, one of the big obstacles to their celibacy is sexual desires. So the point, therefore, is to try to overcome sexual desires if you're a monk. Doesn't mean other people have to do that, but because it's in the chapter, you're going to have to hear about it. Just as in the Tibetan tradition, many of the very greatest lamas are married and have families. And there's still some of the greatest lamas, and I mean, His Holiness the Dalai Lama himself has received teachings from, for example, Dego Khyentse Rinpoche. He was a married lama and he had daughters, and there was absolutely, he's one of the heart gurus for His Holiness. I mean, His Holiness could care less whether he was a monk or whether he was married. As far as the nature of the mind is concerned, it's totally irrelevant. But the reason for usually choosing to be a monk, in Buddhist countries at least, is because it gives you the time and opportunity to give all your attention to your studies and your practice. If you're married, you have to have a job, you have to support your family, you have to engage in all sorts of social activities, and that doesn't give so much time to being one-pointedly devoted to study and practice. But if you are going to be a monk, then the downside is that you'll have to deal also with the physical body, which says, procreate. And so therefore you have to come to terms with that, so that you're not spending all your time having, outwardly looking like a monk, inwardly having sexual fantasies. I mean, that's very pitiful. So therefore the Buddha, in his compassion, tried to help them to see things more clearly from a monk's point of view, so that they could be at peace within themselves and dedicate themselves without being tormented. I mean, this is the point. So it's not that there is in itself, an anger, for example, towards women, but recognizing that women are a danger only because of the monk's mind. I mean, it's not that in the monasteries there are all these women outside desperate to get in. Well, the monks inside desperate to get out. Okay. So he's going on and on, because he does tend to go on and on. If I am not attached to what is unclean, then why do I copulate with the lower parts of others' bodies, which are merely cages of bones tied together with muscles and plastered over with the mud of flesh? Does that sum it up? I bet not many of you are going to go off and watch pornography. Right? Cages of bones tied together with muscles and plastered over with the mud of flesh. English. I myself, he's saying, right, contain many unclean things, which I constantly have to experience. We go to the toilet. We eat something bad and we vomit. And nothing coming from our body is delightful. I mean, this is the point. It's very interesting. We may put in very delicious food, but when it comes out the other end, it is not delicious. And this is natural and perfectly okay, but it shows that the body in itself is not something which is, giving off. When we give off a beautiful smell, it's not because of our sweat, it's because of the perfumes. Right? We mask. In fact, perfume was devised in order to mask the smell of sweat, because sweat in itself doesn't smell nice. And so we're always trying to clean ourselves and polish ourselves and make ourselves up in order that people won't notice that actually what's happening is not so attractive as we'd like it to pretend it is. So, I myself contain many unclean things which I constantly have to experience. So why, because of an obsession for uncleanliness, do I desire other bags of filth? But it is the flesh I enjoy, he says. No, forget the inside bit. The flesh I enjoy, right? If this is what I wish to touch and behold, why do I not desire it in its natural state, devoid of any mind? In other words, if somebody dies, they still have their flesh when they just died, but we don't want to embrace them. Suddenly they're a corpse. Furthermore, any mind that I may desire. All right, so it's not the body, it's the mind. That's what I'm attracted to. It's her mind. So he says, well, in that case, any mind that I may desire is unable to be touched or beheld. And whatever I'm able to touch will not be mental. So why indulge in this meaningless copulation? It is not so strange that I do not understand the bodies of others to be of an unclean nature, but But it is indeed strange that I do not understand my very own body to be by nature unclean. People are so attached to their bodies and identified with our bodies, especially in this day and age. You know, Dhamshala, all the yoga going on here, all the spas and hotels and, you know, all the beauty treatments, male and female nowadays, they tell us, all sexes. And yet, what does our body have? You know, if we looked inside our body, beyond this tiny, tiny skin level, you know, what's there to be so attached to? Why are we identified with that? With our mind, yes. But, you know, it's what he's saying is that, you know, it's all right, we get caught up with other people's attractions, but how can we be so attached to our own body, thinking ourselves so lovely, when actually we all know that, you know, what comes out from our own body, none of it we try to get rid of as quickly as possible. Nobody holds it dear. Everything which comes out from our body is we discard as quickly as possible. So how can we think that our body is so attractive? Our own body. What to speak of others? We don't manufacture purity. We manufacture impurity. Having forsaken the young lotus flower, unfolded by beams of sunlight free from clouds, why, with a mind craving for what is unclean, do I revel in a cage of filth? So, you know, you see something which is pure, like a lotus flower. But when you look at us, nothing in us is pure, actually. We are, just as he says, cages of filth. Since I do not wish to touch a place that is smeared with excrement, why do I wish to touch a body from which that excrement arose? You know, if somebody, you know, goes to the toilet somewhere, we avoid it. And yet we're happy enough to embrace somebody who's filled with it. Or their intestines are clogged. I mean, you know, as I say, this is not bad to think about, everybody, you know, really and truly. How deluded we are in our thinking, if we really look at something straight on. You know, I mean, all of us. If at this moment our skin could dissolve and we could see what's under the skin, ooh, it would be like a horror show. But we don't see. We don't see because we don't want to see. Because we wouldn't be able to deal with it. I mean, even, you know, Halloween and things like this, kids dress like skeletons because skeletons are scary. But we're all skeletons. Skeletons covered up, but skeletons. Since I do not wish to touch, yes, if I am not attached to what is unclean, why do I copulate with the lower parts of others' bodies which arise from the unclean field of a womb and are produced by the seeds within? So the idea is that also the womb itself is really very impure, and then also the sperm. I mean, none of it do we think of as being especially delicious. And that's how we came from a womb, out from a womb. And anybody who's witnessed a childbirth will know it's a very messy affair. We are not spontaneously arising from a lotus. Any of us. I have no wish for a small, dirty maggot which has come from a pile of filth. So why do I desire this body which by nature is grossly unclean? For it too was produced by filth. not only do I not disparage the uncleanliness of my own body, but because of an obsession for what is unclean, I desire other bags of filth as well. Even attractive things such as savory foods, cooked rice and vegetables, make the ground dirty and unclean, should they be spat out from being in the mouth. So even if we have the most delicious food and we chew it and then we spit it out, nobody wants to go near that. It's considered unclean because we chewed it. Although such uncleanliness is obvious, still I have doubts that I should go to the cemeteries and look at the unclean bodies of others that have been thrown there. As I say, in ancient India, somehow they just threw the corpses into the charnel grounds. They didn't burn them. In the Vinaya, a monk is allowed, one of the kinds of cloth that the monk is allowed to wear is that which has been wrapped around corpses in the charnel ground. You're allowed to take that cloth and dye it and wear it. So clearly, even at the time of the Buddha, bodies were not burned mostly. They were just left in the charnel ground, and monks were encouraged to go to the charnel ground and look at the decomposition of the bodies, in order to lose attachment and enchantment with the body. When you see what happens, the minute the mind leaves, then what happens to the body and how these various stages of decomposition to a skeleton. So it's interesting. I don't know why they didn't burn bodies, considering they had lots of wood. I mean, unlike in Tibet, they had plenty of forests, but they somehow didn't burn bodies. They just threw them in the charnel. So one thing is to go there and observe these bodies, and see these bodies are no different from my body. This is what I will become also. It's not different. When I die, this is what's going to happen. Having realized that when their skin is rent open, they give rise to a great deal of fear, how will such things as these ever again give rise to joy? The sense with which somebody's body is anointed are sandalwood and the like, but not that of the other's body. So why am I attached to others' bodies? Because the sense that are others than their own. In other words, when we, people anoint themselves with perfumes and oils, sweet smelling, but that is not them. That's a sweet smelling unguents. Their smell is not that nice. I mean, why everybody has deodorants nowadays? Because before we all stank. We don't anymore because people wash more, and also they use all sorts of chemicals to hide the smell. And then in the old days when they couldn't do that, they would use a lot of perfume. So then you would think, oh, she smells so beautiful. It's not her. It's Chanel number 5. We are deluded beings. Have you noticed? Okay. Since the body has naturally a foul odor, isn't it good to be unattached to it? Why do those who crave for the meaningless things of the world anoint this body with pleasant scents? The point is not to harm the body. This is not, the Buddha always taught about the middle way between extremes. And so we are not torturing the body. We're not harming the body. He already did that during his search for enlightenment. He already went through that side of mortification and recognized that in itself it was not beneficial, it didn't help. But overindulgence is the other extreme. And so the Buddha always taught the middle way between extremes. This it might seem to you extreme, but actually when you look at it, it's just how things are, on a relative level. It's not emptiness, but it is on a relative level, a conventional level. This is how things are. And he's not therefore saying, oh, you bad, bad body, I'm going to beat you up because you're the cause of all my suffering. So you get out your whip and start flagellating yourself. It's not that. The body is not harmed. Nobody's beating ourselves up or anybody else up. But we are looking at how things are when we stop fantasizing. And in order to lessen the attachment to our own body and to the body of others. We take care of the body. He will say later also. You take care of the body, you feed it, you clean it, you exercise it, good. Take care of it, keep health, because we need good health in order to practice. Not that we're harming the body or hating the body. We're just seeing the body as it is. So that we're not thinking that, oh look, I've got wrinkles now, I'm getting old, nobody will love me. What nonsense. We are not our bodies. We can take care of our bodies, you can even beautify your body, it's okay. As long as we recognize that the end of all bodies is in the charnel ground, so to speak. And in the meantime, actually, what we consider to be so beautiful, maybe it's not as beautiful as we imagine it to be. If we look at it realistically. Not making this up. I heard somewhere that young people, when they start training to be doctors, and they go through, the first part where you have to really, that they, at that point, lose a lot of sexual desire. Because, when you're cutting up all these dead corpses and recognizing what's going on inside, suddenly you lose your appetite. But then, of course, the impulses, they're not monks. And so the impulses revive again, and they cover that over what they know is true, because it's too difficult for them to deal with. But if you are, especially if you're a monk, or if you're intending to go into a long retreat by yourself, then it's useful to get rid of that side, not get so fascinated by outer appearance, and recognize that actually what we're trying to grasp at is ultimately not what we are imagining and projecting. We project all the time. And some projections are helpful, but most projections are delusion. And then we get into trouble. Most people's problems are dealing with relationships. Because we are unrealistic in our expectations also. Which is very hard on the other person, as well as ourselves. It causes a lot of pain because of our unreal expectations. Since the naked body, left in its natural state, is very frightening due to its long hair and nails, its yellowish, foul-smelling teeth, and it's being coated with the odor of dirt. If you leave somebody without washing them and cleaning them constantly, ourselves included, if we leave ourselves in for a month or two without washing or cleaning our teeth or doing anything at all, then we're pretty foul. A friend of mine, she was American, she was in Lahore over the winter, and of course Lahore, it's very cold there and nobody bothers to wash at that time, and I think she'd just come from the Cape. And so then she had to leave the country quickly because of her visa, and she got a helicopter out, and she couldn't understand why everybody was kind of moving away from her. But then when she got to Manali and she was in a hotel and she took a look, she understood, not only did she stink, But she was, she was dirty, and her hair, she'd never, her hair had grown out, she didn't wash it, she hadn't washed herself, she hadn't cleaned her teeth, she hadn't changed her clothes for several months. And if you're in the cold, you don't think about it, but then when you come out and everybody else is looking at you and moving away, you get the idea maybe the natural body left to itself is not so delightful. We're like that. We disguise that because we're always washing and scrubbing our teeth and washing our hair and, doing all sorts of things to make us look lovely. But it's only just a little bit on top that is looking lovely. And what about the rest? So he's going on. Why do I make such an effort to polish it, the body, like cleaning a weapon that will cause me harm? Hence, this entire world is disturbed with insanity due to the exertions of those who are confused about themselves. We don't see ourselves as we really are. When my mind arises above worldly concerns, having beheld nothing but skeletons in the cemetery, will there be any joy in graveyard cities which are arrived with moving skeletons? That means towns and bazaars, right? This entire enjoy in graveyard cities, that means here, which are filled with moving skeletons. So if you see, there is something in the early Pali Canon about this woman who had run away from home, and then her family were looking for her, and they meet this monk coming back from alms round, and they say to him, you go to think. They said to him, have you seen a woman pass by here? And he said, well, whether it was a man or a woman, I don't know, but a pile of bones just walked past. He was doing meditations on skeletons. So, we're all skeletons, actually. And we go into, we see a skeleton, hello, and you're a skeleton too. That we think, oh, a skeleton, how frightening, but we're all skeletons. Covered with flesh. Some of us with more flesh than others. So, this is what he's saying. So he said, if we're frightened of seeing skeletons in a cemetery, well, recognize that everywhere we go, the whole world is filled with moving skeletons. The skeletons in the cemetery are at least lying there, not moving. But everywhere else you have all these skeletons on the move. Isn't that enough to make you fall fear? You would love some of these modern movies. Furthermore, these unclean female bodies, this is written from monks, right? So girls, change the gender. Are not found without paying a price. In order to obtain them, I exhaust myself, and in future will be injured in the various hell realms, because we do all sorts of things in order to get money, in order to pay for women in the male sense. That, especially in those days, they have to, there's a big bride part. It's interesting because he talks about a bride price. Whereas nowadays the brides have to pay for a groom. Nowadays in modern India, women have to provide a dowry, which I've never understood, since the male family part of the family, the husband, is getting a slave for life. Why isn't he paying for her? Why does she have to pay for him to be made a slave? Doesn't seem very logical. Who thought that one up? But in this time, obviously, huh? Yeah, somebody, because it's not logical. I think in Islam you buy the bride. But in Hinduism you don't. It's the other way around, which doesn't make sense. But in here, it's obvious that you were buying the bride, because he talks about bride price. Anyway, furthermore, these unclean female bodies are not found without a price. In order to obtain them, I exhaust myself, and in future create bad karma, which will cause injury later in lower realms. As a child, I am unable to increase my wealth. As a youth, what can I do, being unable to afford a wife? At the end of my life, when I have the wealth, being an old man, what good will sex be then? So, the problems of the men. Poor things. Some evil and lustful people wear themselves out by working all day, and when they return home in the evening, their exhausted bodies lie prostrate like corpses. Some have suffering of being disturbed with travel and having to go a long way from home, and although they long for their spouses, they do not see them for years at end. Some who wished for benefit due to confusion even sell themselves for the sake of women and the like. But not attaining what they wish, they're aimlessly driven by the winds of others' actions. I mean, partly this is about finding work, finding jobs. People go out to work, in order to gain pleasure and things which they like and people that they want. They work from morning to night and come back completely exhausted. I mean, even in the modern world, that's so true. That, they're all day long working for what? And, their whole life passes by and then suddenly they're at an end and they think, what was all that about? That, we've been on like a rodent on a wheel, just endlessly. I mean, the fact that you are all in India, apart from those who are born here, says something. I mean, it says that at a certain point you said, wait a minute, what's this all about? Let's look at a different way of seeing things. Let's put our priorities somewhere else than merely working, earning, spending, and then we'd all die of exhaustion. What for? What have we gained? So, some sell their own bodies and without any power are employed by others. And even when their wives give birth, their children fall at the feet of trees and lonely places. I mean, this happens a lot in India. Many people are still caught up in a kind of serfdom, a kind of slavery, where they have no freedom, and although they work for others, they still have no independence, and they're extremely poor, so that some of them don't even have homes. They are still on the streets. They come to Delhi and the other cities, and they are destitute. And even though they work, they can never get themselves, because they're paid such a pittance, they never can get themselves out, or else they're extremely in debt. And the interest rate is far, far greater than the original debt. So they can never get beyond it. They are kept forever as slaves. And the family likewise has to take on that debt. So this is very common, not in Himachal Pradesh, but in other parts of India. It can be very terrible, and whole families, generation after generation, are entrapped and unable to go beyond that. So they work so hard for some of the other people, but at the end of the day they get nothing really back in return. And their children are likewise entrapped in that system. It's really very bad. Some fools who are deceived by desire, wishing for a livelihood, think, I shall earn my living as a soldier, and although afraid of losing their lives, they go to war, or others become slaves for the sake of profit. Some lustful people even cut their own bodies. Others impale themselves on the points of sticks. Some stab themselves with daggers and others burn themselves. Such things as these are quite apparent. People do very strange things. Due to the torment, just want to see what the commentary on that says. Foolish men, ensnared by their attachments to the objects of senses, wanting wealth and comforts, make their lives as robbers, thieves, soldiers, and so on. They decide to make their fortune in the wars, even though they fear for their lives. In order to be successful and to get the betterment of their opponents, they pay protection money to the wicked and cruel bosses and submit to them. They live in fear and become their slaves. Having robbed and stolen because of their attachment to the objects of senses, some have their bodies slashed by weapons, others are impaled on pointed stakes, others are wounded by being run through with a lance, and still others are put to death by fire. They suffer in this and in future life. That's the commentary. Okay. I mean, even in this day and age, people do the strangest things in order to earn money and do indeed bring a lot of harm to themselves, to this body which they hold so precious. And yet, for the sake of gaining more acquisitions or for supporting their family, they take on very, very dangerous occupations in which indeed they can suffer all sorts of, I mean, even people who do things out of kindness as well as, to earn living, like firefighters and these kind of people who every day are risking their lives. And partly it's out of compassion, but partly it's just a means of livelihood. And yet, in order to get money and to get, be able to have a profession, they take on professions which are extremely challenging and extremely dangerous. To protect their body, they take on careers which are extremely injurious to the body. We are a strange lot. So, I mean, it's not just, back in the 8th century. Even today, many people have very, very dangerous careers, actually. Due to torment involved in collecting it, protecting, and finally losing it, I should realize wealth to be fraught with infinite problems. Those who are distracted by their attachment to it have no opportunity to gain freedom from the misery of conditioned existence. If one spends all one's time just trying to accumulate more and more and more wealth, more and more possessions, as many people do, bigger house, bigger car, bigger everything, then at the end of the day, what have we accomplished? First of all, there's always someone with more. And secondly, it doesn't bring happiness. I read an account of a woman who had spent many years taking care of people who had terminal sickness, like cancer and others, and she asked them various questions. Right, you've now got 3 months, 6 months, 2 weeks to live. And one of the questions she asked was, what do you regret most? And almost invariably, they said, I regret giving all my energy to that which ultimately was of no meaning. Which meant, when asked what does that mean, it meant their career and their acquisitions. Now, at the time of death, they saw those were so useless. What did I spend all my time and energy on that for? My children grew up, I wasn't there. I was making money for them. But then what? Then suddenly they've grown up and they've left home. And, all these things which I acquired didn't really bring me any satisfaction, and now I'm about to die. What was that for? And then she said, well, what would you have preferred to do? What would you have rather given your energy to? And they said, well, first of all, to the family, to their children, and to more social outreach, helping others, and to their spiritual life. And they said all of that they put on hold while they were making money and gaining status. And at the end, when you see death in front of you, you see that was a total waste of time. What did I do with my life? I just threw it away for nothing. So it's very good if, while one is relatively young, one can recognize that yes, we have to have a certain amount of something for security and so forth, but beyond that, really put our energy into something which is genuinely meaningful, so that, as I say, at the time of death, one can die with no regrets. But yeah, I did something good with my life. In the same way as animals drawing carriages are able to eat a few mouthfuls of grass, likewise, desirous people have many disadvantages, such as these, and little profit. And since even animals can gain this little profit, who are pained by their previous actions, waste their leisures and endowments so difficult to find for the sake of something trivial that is not so scarce. I mean, the point is that even animals want to be happy, even animals, appreciate kindness, even animals, naturally animals, why even? Naturally animals, we are also animals, want happiness and want to avoid suffering. So even though they are carrying heavy carriages, if they see a nice piece of grass along the way, they'll stop and to take a bite and enjoy it well. And so we're like that. We go through our lives trudging along, and from time to time just taking a mouthful of grass and appreciating it, and then we're back to pulling the heavy carriage again. So why are we doing this? The objects of desire will certainly perish, and then I shall fall into hellish states, into the lower realms. But Buddhahood itself is attained with just 1/1,000,000th of the difficulties involved in continually exhausting myself for the sake of that which is not very great. Hence, the desirous experience greater misery than those following the awakening way of life. And yet for them there's no awakening. So what he's saying is that if we practice and study, that is only a small amount of the difficulties which people have pursuing things which are very ephemeral and of no use whatsoever, ultimately. Like, wealth and big houses, big cars. People work so hard from morning to night, and then at night they're going through their accounts, and then, even in their holidays, they're still on their internet looking at all their stocks and shares, and really, all their mind is full all the time with their worries and their concerns. And it's so difficult for the sake of nothing. And yet we who are supposed to be interested in awakening, if somebody says, well, you have to get up at 4 a.m, oh. Well, I don't know, I'm not a morning person. We don't want to make any effort for the thing which is everlasting, enduring, which is a total transformation of our being, which takes minimum effort compared with the amount of effort which people put into worldly gains. And yet the worldly gains, no matter what, have to be left behind when we die, but awakening or spiritual progress, we take with us. And that is a genuine happiness. It's not ephemeral. It's not a happiness which comes when things go right and then we get depressed when things are not right. This is way beyond all of that. It's the greatest good, the greatest goal. And yet we find it too difficult. We make excuses, we put it off, we procrastinate. We've always got something else that somehow seems more important at the time. And then next thing you know, we're at the end. And we look back and think, whoops, what happened? Started out well. What happened in the middle? I think it's very important what you're saying, because we put a lot of effort into things which ultimately are futile, and we don't put so much effort into that which really matters. And yet it's for our own good, as well as the good of others, to make spiritual progress. We all want happiness. Well, this is the way for happiness. Genuine happiness, not pleasure. Happiness. Joy. The joy of liberation. But, we don't make, sometimes a little bit of effort here and there. Yeah, we're going to retreat and make a bit of effort. Then we come out of retreat and all falls flat again. We are very deluded human beings, actually. We do not see the greater good. And we just put that aside for baubles. It's like seeing gold, and you think, well, brass is so much shinier. So we all go after the brass because that's bright and shiny. Gold is kind of just, dull yellow. It doesn't look very interesting. So I'll go for the brass. And then we miss the jewel, the gold. Something which really has value for the sake of something which is just shiny. Anyway. I just need to get to the end of this section, then we'll have questions. There are any questions? Is anybody? You're supposed to be writing your questions on little pieces of paper. Has that happened? Yes. Okay. So. Then, although afraid of losing their lives, they go to war, animals, and constant miseries of hell, it will be clear there's nothing comparable to the harm caused to desirous beings by weapon, poison, fire, ravines, and foes. Having in this way developed disillusion with desire, I should generate joy for solitude. The fortunate ones stroll in peaceful forests, devoid of disputes and disturbing conceptions. This is very poetic, apparently. In Sanskrit, it's supposed to be very beautiful. They live in joyful houses of vast flat stones, cooled by the sandal-scented moonlight, fanned by the peaceful and silent forest breeze, thinking of what is a benefit for others. They dwell for as long as they wish in empty houses, at the feet of trees and caves, having abandoned the pain of clinging to and guarding possessions. They abide independent, free of care, living as they choose, desireless, having no ties with anyone. Even the powerful have difficulty finding a life as happy and content as this. So, again, what he's saying is that he's praising the joys of solitude. It's true that there are many joys in solitude. It should not be confused with the feeling of loneliness, which many people suffer from in our modern world. Apparently in the UK there is actually a minister of loneliness. I'm not making this up. I just read it. Because it has become such a really widespread problem for many people. People lead such isolated lives nowadays, even though they are interconnecting more and more on their apps. They are not interconnecting one-to-one as people. As human beings, we are very social beings normally. And so traditionally, people lived in extended families, in extended villages, and in extended towns. When I was a child, we knew our neighbors. And at least during the day, you didn't lock the door, and people came in, people went out. If you needed help, people were there. And we knew who was around us, right? But nowadays, people less and less are on anything more than nodding terms with neighbors. If that, somebody was just saying that somebody had died 15 years in a flat, in an apartment, and nobody knew. They were just saying at lunchtime. They had been dead for 15 years and nobody had noticed. So this is the society we live in nowadays, where even your neighbors haven't noticed that you're not around anymore. Your family, anybody, nobody knows. And so, as I say, there was actually a minister for loneliness whose job is to try to, I presume his job is to try to, or her job, is to try to see what can be done about this problem. But loneliness is a very, very sad state of mind, and it leads to deep depression and a sense of alienation, and it's a big problem. This is not what he's talking about. To be alone is not the same as being lonely. I was lonely when I lived in my community in Dalhousie, where I was normally the only foreigner and I was the only nun. So the monks were very kind, but I wasn't a monk. And the lay people were very nice, but I wasn't one of them either. And also I was a foreigner. So I didn't really belong anywhere. And so I was very lonely. Even though every day I was my Lama's secretary, so I saw him and I saw the Lamas and so forth, but still I didn't belong. They were very nice, but I didn't belong. So I was very lonely. Sometimes I would cry myself to sleep with loneliness. I only stayed because of my Lama. Otherwise I wouldn't stay. Everybody was very nice, not like they were being mean, and the monks were very sweet. I love our monks. I didn't belong. But when I lived by myself in the cave, I never felt alone. I felt we were surrounded by millions of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and it got quite crowded in there. And all the Dakinas, because Rahul is the land of the Dakinas, and I always felt the Dakinas around. Also, the local spirits were very friendly. They really were. They did many things which manifested, and you could see that they were very supportive. They're happy someone's practicing. And so I never felt alone, ever. I never felt lonely. But I was alone. Once winter came, like in November, the snow fell, I knew that for the next 6 months nobody could come. That I would be completely alone. And I felt such joy. It's very different, the sense of solitude in retreat and in nature, to being stuck in a sterile flat in the middle of the city and nobody cares. So don't confuse the two. It's a very different feeling. And so there's great joy in solitude, which is what he's talking about. Beautiful nature, if possible, and just, a practice which one is doing. I often think, if I did something and had to go to prison, I would have to hit one of the guards so they'd put me in solitary confinement. And in solitary confinement, if you had a practice, then it would be retreat. Really, no, joking. When I was in Australia, I visited this women's prison, and one of the people in solitary confinement was doing her prostrations. So she was very happy. She had the opportunity to do her mudra. And so, like this, she had not known about mudra until she went to prison, and Buddhist prison workers had, helped her. But she was very happy. And she said the guards got very confused because she was doing these prostrations which looked like punishment, but in fact she was full of joy. So it's not whether we're with others or separate, but the state of mind and what we're doing with where we are. But here, Shantideva, who's stuck in this monastery with thousands and thousands of monks, is dreaming of the joys of solitude and how beautiful it would be to be out there, just having all the time and space to completely merge and absorb oneself in one's practice without the distractions of having to deal with a social life of any sort. You can just completely become one with your practice. It's very joyful. Okay, so we will leave it there. Tomorrow he's dealing with the importance of cultivating bodhicitta through equality with others and then exchanging oneself for others. But in the meantime, are there any questions? Is spirituality only a luxury for those who are well off? Well, for a start, all the monks, nuns are not well off. The whole point is that they have renounced the world and they have nothing. We had a great deal of problems trying to get nuns to join this International Buddhist Women's Group which was taking place in Australia, called Sakidita, and they applied for a visa for Australia and they were all denied, all these geshe-mas, or these doctorates of Buddhist philosophy among the nuns, etc. One who had PhDs and MAs and all sorts of things. They were all refused. And when we contacted the Australian embassy and said, why are you refusing these very highly accomplished nuns? They said, but they have no job. They have no bank account. They have no family, possessions. So they're therefore very suspect. They're bound to want to jump ship when they get to Australia. We said they're Buddhist nuns. No, they do not have jobs. No, they do not have bank accounts. Because they're nuns. So luxury has nothing to do with it. It's not a matter of being... Of course, I appreciate in the West it's very difficult because now a lot of Dharma courses cost a lot of money. And this is very unfortunate, but there are reasons for why this happened. And it is very unfortunate because on one hand you're told, not to put any, too much effort into your worldly life. But then if you don't, you can't afford to go to Dharma courses. So, that's in the West, that is a problem. But nonetheless, no, it's nothing to do with being well off. It's to do, spirituality is to do with looking in your heart to see what really has meaning in this life. What will really ultimately be of benefit both to yourself and to others. How to purify the mind, our wild, uncontrolled minds. To tame those minds. A tamed mind brings happiness, the Buddha said. Let the wise man tame his mind. A tamed mind brings happiness. We look for happiness outside, other people, possessions, better situations. But genuine happiness is within us and depends on how we cultivate our heart-mind. That's what brings happiness. And that has nothing to do... when I lived in Lahore, in the cave, I had nothing. Actually, I lived on 90 rupees a month. Of course, the economy was different then, but still 90 rupees was not much. And, what did we have? Rice and dal and potatoes, because I grew potatoes. I mean, outwardly, when I look back, I think, my goodness me, I didn't have anything. Well, who cared? Didn't even think about it. It was so totally irrelevant. The little cave was so perfect for doing retreat. That didn't matter, I had no money. Who cared? So, spirituality has nothing to do with wealth. Some of the richest people in the world are totally miserable. A while back I met a girl who was from a very, very famous family, well known for their wealth. And she said the one good thing about being born in that kind of family was that you saw that being rich did not bring happiness. She said, most of my family are alcoholics and totally miserable. They've all got psychiatrists and they're just a mess. She said, the only people in the family who are happy are the ones who are busy giving all their wealth away. She said, they're happy. That everybody else is not. So wealth has nothing to do with happiness or with spirituality. How would you think? No, it's nothing to do with that at all. I mean, you can be very, very wealthy and spiritual. You can be totally on the poverty line and spiritual. Doesn't make any difference. It's not the point. How is it possible that karma will be there with us in the next life? Because it follows on, the substrata consciousness, the alaya vijnana, our eighth consciousness, follows on lifetime after lifetime until we attain enlightenment. And that alaya vijnana is transformed into dhammakaya. So until then, all the seeds of our consciousness, all the seeds of our body, speech and mind, which have created karma. Karma means actions. So any intentional actions of body, speech and mind plant little seeds in our substrata consciousness, and that goes with us lifetime after lifetime. But we don't know when they're going to ripen. I mean, this is the important thing. If, from a Buddhist perspective, we've had countless lifetimes in many, many forms, not just human forms, all forms, then we have created zillions and zillions of seeds. And we don't know when the causes and conditions are going to arise to cause various seeds to rise. So therefore, bad things happen to good people, good things happen to bad people. Because it's not just the results of this lifetime, but of many, many lifetimes. When the causes and conditions arise, those seeds will come up. So therefore, it's not so important actually what happens to us. What is important is how we respond to what happens to us. If we respond skillfully, then we are creating positive seeds for the future. We're moment to moment eating up the past and creating the future. So therefore it's very important how we respond to what is happening to us at this moment. Not just physically, but also mentally. Because moment to moment to moment, we are creating the future. Can you please tell us more about differences between two types of desire, attached ones and virtuous ones? Well, it's obvious. Any desire which is conjoined with the negative roots, like greed and anger and pride, jealousy, and so forth, these are negative roots. And so any desire which is conjoined with those negative roots is negative. And any desires which are conjoined with positive roots, like, kindness, compassion, generosity, patience, and so forth, are good roots. So therefore, the desire for enlightenment for the sake of all beings is the most ultimate desire, good desire. But even the desire to be a kinder person or a good person or to help people is a good desire. But desires which are based on greed and grasping and anger and jealousy are negative because the root is negative. It's like if you have a plant, if it's got a poisonous root, it's going to give a poisonous plant. If it's got a healthy root of a healthy plant, then it will give forth health-bearing plants. I mean, so the Buddha always said that our karma is our intention. In other words, the root which is underlying that action of body, speech and mind. What is that action? The basic root, not what we tell ourselves, but the real root. Oh, we're never going to deal with all this. This is the point. So, desirous, good desire is that which is based on good roots. Evil desire is those which are based on negative roots. My wife's father is dying, like many of our family members, everybody's family members. He doesn't believe in anything beyond death. How could I be helpful towards him and others like him through the dying process? Well, you know, all you can do is to say to somebody, okay, you're dying. Please forgive anyone who has harmed you. Let it go. And please say thank you to those that you love and let them know you love them. And then just let go. And if you can try, think of light. That's enough. So that if they die and they all black out, then there are no worries. But they won't. So then they can go on knowing that they cleared up a lot of the mess left behind in this lifetime by letting go of resentments and by opening the heart in gratitude to those whom they love. And that's enough. I mean, absolutely don't try to convert them or in any way try to influence them. Allow them to let go now. You're going on. Don't cling. Just let go. And think of something beautiful and positive in your mind. Keep your mind positive. Love, light, if you can manage that. Or at least let go. Then that's enough. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, if we have led reasonably good lives, then when we go, we have nothing to fear. We shouldn't get all... He castigated, and my Lama also did the same thing. All these Lamas who make it sound like every little tiny thing you do, you're going down to hell. It's not true. My Lama himself said to me, actually it's quite difficult to be reborn in hell. It is the result of very cruel, evil mind that delights in the suffering of others. Then you're in trouble. But just for little foibles which we've done along the way and the mistakes we've made along the way, you're not going to... If your mind isn't... When we die, we experience what we are projecting. So this is why it's very important while we're alive to be sure the contents of our mind as much as possible are positive. So that when we die, that's what we will receive back. So therefore, we should be very careful. But unless we have the kind of mind which is genuinely sadistic and nasty and cruel and enjoys the sufferings of others, those kind of minds, they're in trouble. But for ordinary people, it's no problem. We just go on. So to your Father, let go of all your resentments, rejoice in the goodness of all the people that you love, and let go of attachments as much as you can, and just go forward with a light heart. What do we do to avoid being regretful when we die? Live well. That's it. What about eventual desire to want to have someone with you when you die? You're not going to have anyone with you when you die. So mate, you're going to die alone. Even if you die in a plane crash, each one dies alone. Can't take nobody with you when you go. Nothing with you when you go, except your karma and your consciousness. But how do we avoid the present loneliness? Try to make friends with yourself. Truly. If I don't follow a career, how do I survive? Well, you can follow a career. No one's stopping follow a career which has meaning for you, which possibly can benefit others. Nothing wrong with having a career. Some of the Buddha's main students were businessmen, wealthy farmers, kings, princes, but they were all followers of the Buddha. He never said give up your career. Nothing wrong with having a career, provided your work does not cause harm to others or to yourself. If possible, it's beneficial, even if it's neutral, by bringing awareness and kindness to the workplace, that turns something neutral into something positive. Loneliness comes because we are alienated from ourselves. So it's very important to make friends with ourselves. Then we have a very good companion. And since we cannot leave this friend behind, we have to carry them everywhere we go, we might as well have a good friend. So the Buddha said, cultivate friendliness, kindness, and compassion first to yourself, and then to others. The Buddha was very practical. Well, the audience talk about no self, no self, no self. Actually, he starts by showing how to have a good sense of self. Before we can drop the self, we have to have a very well balanced sense of self to walk the path. As Shantideva himself said somewhere, self-confidence is essential. If we don't believe ourselves, then how can we walk the path? We have to believe, and we have to have a good companion with us. And the only companion that we take with us everywhere, even into our dreams, is our own self. So therefore, it's very important to make friends. If we are really friends with ourselves, then we don't feel so lonely, because we have a good friend with us. What to do with the need and desire to be loved? Well, learn to love everybody. The Buddha taught, on these qualities of opening the heart. When, it's very important to recognize that when the Buddhists talk about non-attachment, they don't mean that we don't love. But they just mean that we don't love with attachment as much as possible. Of course, the Buddha described love as just as a mother loves her child, her only child. That he puts as his example of selfless love. What he meant was that a mother will sacrifice herself for her child. If her child is sick, she would happily take the sickness onto herself. She loves the child more than herself. That kind of love has to be given to all beings, not just to those who we are particularly connected with. It's natural, as I said, as social beings that we wish to be loved. But what we need is to learn how to accept a love which is not grasping and clinging. It's the clinging bit which causes trouble, not the love. Love, the ultimate nature of our mind is love. That's our true nature, but we distort it through this grasping. And then it causes all sorts of trouble. The heart which is open to unconditional love and compassion is a joyful heart. And it doesn't cling. It's these little hooks that cling to everything, like Velcro. It catches everything. That's the problem. Not the actual feeling of caring for other beings, wishing all beings to be well and happy, and that feeling of that the universe ultimately is love and intelligence. We might find it difficult to believe at this time, but that is something much deeper than all the problems which we create because of our ignorance and our desires. So be kind, be nice, love everybody else. If we imagine loving everybody else, eventually that will come back to us. But don't expect everyone to love us without us loving all other beings. It's reciprocal. It looks like the way to treat monk's sexual desire can cause aversion to human body. Is that the purpose of it? As I said, the Buddha taught the middle way between extremes. So it wasn't that he was teaching per se an aversion, he was teaching disenchantment. He was teaching that we should not think our body is something that is, needs to be spoiled and we give so much attention nowadays, especially in affluent societies, to what we eat, to all the beauty spas, to all the facelifts, all the magazines telling us how to be more beautiful. Even men nowadays are caught up in it. Ugh. It's a huge multi-billion-dollar industry to get you obsessed with the beauty of the body. So, what the Buddha is saying, and especially for the monastics, is, yes, you eat. They go on alms round, or people come and make offerings. They eat. If they're sick, there are medicines. They are not doing anything which is extreme to cause injury to the body. They're not beating themselves up. They're respecting the body, because with a body we can practice the Dhamma path. So thank you, body. But we don't get obsessed with the body. We keep it healthy, we keep it clean, we take care enough, but not so that it becomes, the be-all and end-all, because also that causes suffering. When the body begins to decay, when we naturally begin to age, when we get sick, then people fall apart. Because you're not allowed to do that. You've got to be ever beautiful. You've got to live forever, ever absolutely gorgeous. And supposing you're not absolutely gorgeous. So the Buddha said, take care of your body, look after it, keep healthy. But where we have to give attention to healthiness is the mind. It's no use having a beautiful, healthy body in a dirty, filthy mind. An unhealthy mind. A mind full of craving and anger and pride and jealousy and fears and all sorts of, so many beautiful girls who end up anorexic. They have sick minds. Often from very wealthy families, very attractive girls. I've seen it again and again. Mentally very, very disturbed. So it's very important to have a healthy mind. That's where we have to put our attention. Yes, take care of the body enough that it's working well so that we can practice yoga. It's to get the body supple and the nadis straightened out and the prana running as it should, well balanced, in order to sit and meditate, not to be beautiful. All these asanas were in order so that when we sit, we can sit beautifully, perfectly, in a perfect, all the nadis straight, everything flowing beautifully, so that the mind will settle easily, will not be caught up in aching shoulders and knees and so forth. We can sit perfectly. People who can sit in perfect Padmasana, they say they can feel the energy shooting up from top to bottom, because everything is aligned. Everything is well balanced. Then the mind will also be well balanced. That's why they do yoga. For the mind, not for the body. So, Buddhism is not against the body, but it's saying, look at the body as it really is. Let's not kill ourselves. Keep it healthy, keep it clean, but use it for something worthwhile. Don't waste this opportunity of a precious human body. If solitude is the path to happiness, where are we social beings? Well, we can also be happy with our beings, but it is good sometimes to withdraw into solitude. It doesn't mean we have to spend all our life in solitude, but there are times when even if you're in a group meditation, nonetheless you are within your own solitude because you're not speaking, you usually keep your eyes down and don't interact with others. And this gives a rest for the mind to come into itself and look into its own inner social reactions. And from that, then, it makes it much easier to interact with all other beings. I mean, mostly in Buddhist monasticism, mostly everybody is together. I mean, the monasteries are full of monks or nuns who all live together, much more than most people here do. You know, they share everything together. They share, they eat together, they study together, they sleep several in a room together, they go on walks together, everything is together. But nonetheless, and the Buddha, as I said, talked a lot about the importance of community. And how important companionship is. Good companionship was very much praised by the Buddha. At one point, Ananda said to the Buddha, I've been thinking about Ananda was the Buddha's attendant and cousin. And he said, I've been thinking about it, Bhagavan, and it occurs to me that good companionship is half the spiritual path. And the Buddha said, no, Ananda, it's the whole of the spiritual path. Which is interesting. But he gave a lot of attention to cultivating the Sangha, not just the monastic Sangha, but also the lay Sangha, and how important the Fourfold Sangha was for Buddhism and for spiritual enlightenment in the world. So that is very much there. But sometimes it's good just to be apart and look into one's own mind without having to interact with others. Not all the time, but sometimes it can be very, very beneficial. As a layperson on this path, how much time should I dedicate to the retreat in solitude? What is the balance of breathing in and breathing out? A retreat, solitude versus engagement in the world. Well, it's up to you. Of course. But if we are interested in cultivating any skill to the point of being proficient, we have to give it attention. We have to give it time. Nothing is gained overnight. Drop by drop, the water jar is filled, said the Buddha. So it depends on your circumstances, it depends on your inclinations, it depends on your karma. But definitely, if possible, we should give at least some time to breathing in as well as breathing out. But, I mean, if you take it, and again, everybody is different, everybody has different opportunities, and everybody is different on the path. You know, some people are rank beginners, some people very quickly gallop ahead. Depends what we did before. But we can think of it like if you are making bread, then you have a lump of dough, and it's very heavy. And so in order to make bread, not chapatis, but Western style bread, you have to mix a little yeast. Now that yeast doesn't have to be as much as the dough. It's actually only a little piece of yeast and a big piece of dough. we don't throw the dough out. We mix the yeast with the dough. And that little bit of yeast lightens the whole dough. Right? The dough is important. Then we can cook it and eat it. So the Dharma perspective is like that yeast which takes the heavy dough of ordinary worldly life and transforms it into something light and able to be cooked and be very nourishing and delicious. So we don't always need a great big chunk of retreat. That even a little retreat, if we can integrate that into our daily life, can have an enormous effect on the whole of our daily life. What are we trying to do? We're trying to become more conscious, more aware, more present, have some space inside, connect with our inner silence, and then bring that level of consciousness into our daily life. So once we have begun to recognize that inner awareness and space, we can then begin to bring it and merge it with our ordinary interconnections in our daily life. And then it's like if you have a laptop, well, we use the laptop, then the battery dies out, and then you need to recharge it. And then it gets recharged, and you can use the laptop again. We don't have to spend endlessly recharging. We recharge in order to be able to use the appliance. But at a certain point, the appliance is going to run out of juice, and we need to recharge again. So it depends how old your battery is, how long you retain the charge. Right? Different people are different. Oh, I did that one. Consider attachment in and of itself. Consider suffering in and of itself. Okay. Is there a necessary connection between the two? In other words, are attachment and suffering intrinsically connected? Or is it the case that the purported connection is imposed by us? Well, the Buddha said, dukkha is attachment. He said dukkha is clinging. Sorry. That's what Buddha said. He said it's not because of outer circumstances, it's not because of other people, it's not because of what happens to us. It's how we respond that causes dukkha or not. And normally we respond by grasping. Even aversion is a kind of grasping, an inverse grasping. And therefore we suffer. And one can see this when people talk about things which are, very painful for them. We can see the problem is that they can't just let go. We can't accept. We resent. We want to get rid of. We're upset about, we're angry towards, or else we're grasping on, hoping this is going to bring us sense of satisfaction and fulfillment. It's always this grasping, either from aversion or through desire, that holds us tight. We can't just let go. The wheel of life, we're clinging to it. Nobody's chaining us. We could drop off tomorrow. But we're grasping with two hands. This is the problem. We can't let go. So yes, the Buddha said suffering equals clinging. So therefore, the resolution is let go. Doesn't mean you have to let go in the sense that everything falls out. You can hold like this. Gently. Not like this. It's this bit which is the problem, causes suffering. We lose people. We can't accept that they're gone. We lose position. We lose our health. We lose our beauty. We can't accept that that's natural. Everything is impermanent. Can't hold on to anything. But we can't accept that. Things have to be the way we want them to be, and we hold on. And then we suffer. And then we blame other people, other conditions, life in general. It's not fair. Why me? Why not me? So yeah, that's what the Buddha said. And if you look at it, you can see it's true. We don't hold things lightly, we grasp. And that causes pain. We think that's our security. But that is the cause of all our hopes and fears. As long as we hope, we have fear. Anxiety, worry, concern. If we allow things just to flow, then it's no problem. Whatever is happening is happening. Sometimes things go the way the ego would like them to go, and sometimes things don't go the way the ego would like to go. So what? When things are difficult, we can say, well, samsara is dukkha. Big surprise. Then it's no worry. The Buddha said there are two kinds of dukkha. There is physical dukkha, mental dukkha. And physical dukkha we can't do anything about. Dukkha means suffering, unsatisfaction. It's dis-ease. That things are not, they are dis-ease in our world. That everything would be perfectly okay if only. There's always an if only there. I don't know, really, human beings. So we have physical dukkha, which is, physical. We get sick, we get cold, we get hot, all things happen. So that is inevitable. If we have a body, the body is going to suffer at some point or other. You sit here and you're thinking, oh God, how long is this going on for my poor knee? That's physical dukkha. Unavoidable. But mental dukkha, that's something else. If the mind resents the physical dukkha, we have double dukkha. Right? We have dukkha on top of dukkha. That doesn't give me a double dukkha. But if we are not, if we accept the physical dukkha, and if we can alleviate it, okay, if we can't, we can't, so what, this is the world, then the mind is free. The mind is not concerned. The body might be having problems, but the mind is not concerned. The mind will do what it can to alleviate the problem if it can be alleviated. If it can't, so then, okay, never mind. The important thing is always how to cultivate the mind. That is the essence of Buddhism, that we tame our mind, that we train our mind. By training the mind, we transform the mind. Through transforming the mind, eventually we transcend our mind, our ordinary conceptual dualistic mind, and enter a whole different level of consciousness, which is non-dualistic, not centered around me and mine. I'd like to just read you, as we're doing this, I didn't intend to read it now, but I will, because I think it's important. Because we sometimes think, oh yes, this is all right, this is these big guys, they can do all these things, but me, what can I do? This was a letter written 2 days ago from New Zealand, from Canberra in Australia, by a man there. He says, I was at the top of the stairs, really depressed. Depressing thoughts felt painful. Happy thoughts felt painful. In fact, all thoughts felt painful. Around the middle of the staircase, a space opened up, and like a cloud, both good thoughts and bad thoughts dissolved. It was literally like a curtain parting. By the base of the stairs, a thought-free awareness opened up. No effort, nothing contrived, tranquil, spacious, free. It was like coming home. All of a sudden, I felt like meditating again, reading Dharma books again. Craving left, ill will left. I felt confidence in the teachings I had never known before. In fact, I can understand teachings that I never could before. The Dharma makes sense in a way it never has. What is even stranger is that this thought-free awareness has remained. I don't have to make it, it's just there. And everything happens within it. Yes, I can still think. My brain still works. But it has more space, more scope, more loving kindness, more patience, and less effort. That's what we're talking about. That is the true nature of our mind, which we all possess, but we cover over because we're so involved in our conceptual thinking mind that we cannot see levels of consciousness which are our true nature, but remain inaccessible as long as me is in charge. This is what the Buddha meant when he said no self. Then everything becomes effortless. Very clear, transparent, obvious. Loving kindness, compassion naturally arise because they're the nature of the mind. We don't have to make them. We don't have to contrive them. Our mind becomes clear, lucid. Things become so obvious. Spontaneously, we do what other people see as being skillful. But from our side, it's just obvious, effortless. So this, I thought, this very beautiful description. Later I'll read you a little bit of Mingyur Rinpoche's experience. But Mingyur Rinpoche, of course, is a very highly advanced practitioner who's done many, many, many years of retreat. So of course you expect he would get special things happening. This is just an ordinary guy from Australia. So I want you to, just to understand that it's not, we make efforts, but in the end we are making efforts to become effortless. And a genuine state is something very innate within us. And we suddenly realize it. You can't even contrive to realize it. And people who do find, they're so surprised because it's so obvious, so natural. He says it's like coming home. Fantastic bliss, vision, light. It's so simple. So obvious. Always there, but we just don't recognize. It happens that some kind of ghost wants to eat you and actually eats you. You might, after night, should you just let it? Yeah, why not? I mean, our nuns speak ghosts every night. They do church, where you visualize cutting up your body and calling all the ghosts to come and eat you. So, good. Maybe, but give it to them with the desire that this may help to liberate them. It's given out of compassion. Through feasting on my body, may you attain liberation. That's the point. It's not in order to become a flesh-eating ghost. It's in order to help the ghost to become liberated. Because even gods have Buddha nature. And we shouldn't be afraid of ghosts. Ghosts are in need of our love and compassion. So, give them all the love and compassion that we can. Why not? How did you overcome loneliness in community of monks? I didn't. I just cried and then I went and lived by myself. Which routines did you have during the years in the cave to be able to survive? Well, I planted potatoes and turnips. so that you have things to live on in the winter, and I had my practices, which I was doing, and that took up most of the day. Of course, in the winter, there's a lot of work clearing away snow and melting snow for water, this much snow, this much water, and chopping wood and things. But, it's all part of the daily routine. How is it that we sentient beings were designed to be so different? Nobody designed us, we just got there. So for thousands of years of evolution, evolution's become constant. Why? I have no idea. You would think we would be getting more intelligent after all these many rebirths, but we do not seem. We seem to be repeating the same mistakes over and over and over. We get technologically more advanced, but a lot of that technology is for destroying other sentient beings. And in general, we're as deluded as we ever were. I don't know why, honestly and truthfully. But the good news is that this is all part of our delusion, and ultimately we all have Buddha nature. This is the good news, that ultimately, on a relative level, we're in a total mess, but on an ultimate level, all will be well. Because we do, all of us, not just humans, but animals and insects and fish and birds and ghosts, we all have Buddha nature. In other words, we all have the potential to awaken. And eventually we will all awake, wherever. But time is infinite. And we humans have been on this planet only a very short time. We've messed it up pretty well. But dinosaurs were on this planet for tens of millions of years. I mean, some people look at dinosaurs saying, oh, they have such big bodies and small brains, that's why they were extinct. That is very unfair to dinosaurs. Because actually dinosaurs were the most successful, along with cockroaches, of anybody living on this earth. They lived for tens of millions of years. We've only been tens of thousands. They died because of cataclysmic, cataclysmic events from outside, which almost destroyed the earth as we know it, and therefore they couldn't survive. But apart from that, they were beautifully attuned to this world, and they certainly didn't go around destroying it in a way that we clever little sentient beings called humans have managed to do. And so, although we are considered to be Homo sapiens, we're not all that sapient. We're pretty dumb in many ways, but we have potential. We have potential to wake up. And let us hope that, because our delusion is a delusion also, from an ultimate point of view. On one level, we are awake. It's just that at this moment we're still dreaming, so we don't know that. So, eventually we will wake up from our dreams. We're just dreaming. When we wake up from our dream, then we will realize that ultimately we have always been awake. This is just our dream. So never mind. I don't know. In fact, in the UK, the ministry is for suicide, not loneliness. I read it was for loneliness. That was why I said for loneliness. That makes more sense. He would be a minister for suicide. Suicide is often... But in the book I read, which I had here, but it doesn't matter, they said that there is actually a minister for loneliness. That's why I quote my sources. It was in this book, which was written by very eminent Buddhist scholars. But whatever, suicide or loneliness, it's a real problem now, everywhere. And, the more affluent we get, the more miserable we get, the more alienated we get, the more despairing we get. What can you say? I mean, many of the people who do suffer from loneliness or commit suicide are not because of poverty or sickness. Outwardly they are quite affluent, well educated. They look on one level like they have everything. Inwardly they have nothing. And they despair. Despair is a terrible, terrible thing. This deep depression, which is so endemic nowadays, everywhere. Look at the amount of opiates that people are taking on a daily basis, ordinary people. So there's something very sick in our society, but the only cure comes through making a healthy mind. Which is why people are also interested nowadays in meditation and mindfulness, which previously were regarded as being kind of weird. Nowadays it's quite mainstream. It's because people are trying to find some solution. But, mindfulness and meditation only work if we are also working towards having a healthy mind. Would you comment on the body not just being a skeleton full of organs, but a brain which enables the developing loving being? Well, I don't know that the brain does much. The heart, the inner heart chakra, not the boom 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 heart. The genuine nature of our intelligence is not just in the brain, which is why neuroscientists cannot find consciousness. And if you mention consciousness, they shudder. And they even say, we do not discuss that. Somebody said, one very eminent neuroscientist said to me, that is the elephant in the living room. We do not discuss consciousness. Because they don't know what it is. They can't find it on their machines. They can find neural pathways and emotions. But they can't find... It's like space. You can describe the pillars and the chairs and the tables and the people, but you can't describe space. And yet everything is space. Without space there would be no people, chairs or tables. And the people, chairs and tables are space, ultimately. And yet you can't label space, you can't grasp it. You can't taste it, touch it, see it, hear it. And yet it's all pervading. This is the nature of consciousness. Without this ultimate nature of consciousness, this non-dual level of pure awareness, you couldn't hear, see, taste, touch, or think. And yet, we cannot see it. We cannot grasp it. But we can realize it. That's what meditation is ultimately about. Recognizing our true nature, which is not who we identify with. It's not the body. It's not the brain. That's all left behind. But something else goes on. Our primordial awareness goes on. That's our true nature, which we share with all beings. It's non-dual because it's not I and other. It just is. As the Buddha said, in the seeing there is only the seeing, in the hearing there is only the hearing, in the perceiving there is only perceiving, in the cognizing there is only the cognizing. There's no I and me behind it. That's our delusion. There's perception but no perceiver. Then we wake up. Don't look so worried. questions?
Yes, okay.
Just get ready.
Yeah. Oh, I see, I mentioned it. Thank you so much. Inshallah, it works definitely.
I might check now. Sometimes they take
Tomorrow the teaching will start at 9 o'clock, please, so everyone will be here at a little bit early on time so you can gather place and be aware. Thank you.
I have a small request. So when you go out of the gompa, there are two donation boxes. One for DJL, Jetsunma's memory, and one for Tushita. So donations are most welcome. Thank you. Thank you everybody, and see you all tomorrow. Thank you.